May 12th, 6 p.m. And we're here tonight to discuss the comments we've received on the affordable housing plan. There were a few comments, and I just, for the record, want to take the roll. So I'm just Art Cassavant, Kevin Moynihan. There we go.
Here.
Here.
Peggy.
Peggy here. Here.
Scott Hobbs.
Here.
Krista Nielsen.
Here.
Lynn Brooks Ovney, that's me. And John Goodwin isn't here tonight. So I sent everyone a copy of the draft. And I thought the most efficient way to do it was, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but was to put the draft on the screen so everyone can see it with the comment boxes that are there, and we could just go through those comments and discuss if we want to add it, edit it, and I can do it on screen, the editing, if we want, because I think would be the most efficient way to go through it. There were comments. Resident Giacomo Landi, who spoke at the comment session, and there were comments from Westcog, and that was it. So all the comment boxes, I've added every comment that we received, even though they say I gave the comment, those are the comments. So if everyone's okay with that, I'm going to share the screen so we can work right off the document. So the first comment was that the date should be changed. Obviously, we're going to change the date to reflect May of 2022. I'm assuming everyone's okay with that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And then the next comment, Westcog commented that that saying that we should have rolling moratoriums isn't a strategy to increase affordable housing, and that we should take that as a strategy.
I tend to agree with that. It seems like that's more of a goal. It's one of our goals to move toward it, but to move toward having adequate affordable housing, but it's not really a strategy. How we would achieve a moratorium becomes more of a part of a strategy.
Though achieving a moratorium would obviously increase affordable housing.
Right, but that's a goal. That's a goal that supports achieving affordable housing, but it's not a strategy in itself.
I think that's a good example of corporate wordsmithing that's inconsistent with what our town thinks is an objective. I recommend that we leave the strategy in, acknowledging that the underlying actions necessary to make a moratorium effective would require other actions.
Yeah,
Okay.
I tend to lean towards leaving it in as well, because like I said, I think that pursuing the moratorium increases affordable housing. And frankly, that was a carryover from the 2011 housing opportunity study, where it was also listed as a strategy. So this is not new that we're calling this one of our strategies.
So
Okay.
so I can add in language that basically indicates that pursuing a moratorium is ultimately gets us closer to affordable housing, because to attain a moratorium you would have had to have constructed new affordable housing.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that the strategy of the moratorium gains public support locally, and so I do think it is important to keep it in.
Okay, so I'm just going to add a hold here, because I'm going to have to add some language, and I don't think, unless anyone has some any of you have an idea of what the language should be right off the top of your head.
Yeah, I think, Lynn, the most efficient way is to kind of have a conversation, come to a general conclusion, and then unless we really feel strongly, you probably need to come up with the language, because collectively writing it will probably be hard.
Yes, it will. So I'm gonna skip to the next one. And so so the next comment came from a member of the public and asked us to explain in the background of the document that just why our application for a moratorium was not submitted on October 24th, 21. I would say that here it's irrelevant for this document. That's a separate affordable housing discussion related to the moratorium.
Yes,
I agree. I agree.
with
Okay, so I'm not that change. Peggy or Scott, did you want to say anything, or I didn't mean to cut you off?
Nope, I'm good.
I agree with that. It doesn't belong in this document.
Okay. Oh. This is what happens when you have sketchy connections to the internet. So the next comment focused on private developers using 830G as a process to develop affordable properties on their own land outside of whatever the town strategizes.
Lynn, is that a comment on number 2 or number 3?
I think it's a comment on number 2, but it could be a comment on number 3 as well, actually.
Well,
Mhm.
because number 2, I think, is about public sector creation of affordable housing. Number 3 is about private sector.
Yeah, I think it's, well, from my read of it, it's sort of, I would think it is
Could I make a suggestion that might
Yeah.
deal with this? Under number 2, I think we should take out the word continue and begin by prioritize public support for affordable housing via appropriate public-private partnerships and other activities.
I think also that the wording public support might be confusing people
Right.
here, because what we're talking about is public sector development of affordable housing. We're not necessarily, I mean, obviously public sector development should have public support and community buy-in, but I think the way it's worded here might be making people believe that we're talking about community buy-in when we're talking about public sector development and financing. So maybe consider changing public support, my suggestion.
more like community
So-
support.
No, more like public sector development of affordable housing.
I think it could be both, Krista. I mean,
Yeah.
Because I don't know that we want to necessarily say we want to prioritize public sector development. Because I don't know that the town wants to start looking at building more Canaan parishes and millports. You know, and financially, and of course, big developments and things like that. But I think we would like to see more of a partnership with private developers that we are able to build incrementally up to where we can, you know, build up to our HUE credits to move forward. So I don't know if, especially if you say it's prioritizing, are we saying that that's what our priority is, to build more large affordable housing developments?
Well, so
That would
just
be either housing authority or housing authority limited partnerships like we have with Canaan Parish.
well, I'm just looking ahead to page 20, where we kind of break down the strategies under this goal, and they talk about identifying potential sites for, I mean, I guess I thought this whole section was about, yes, the housing authority or the town continuing to find ways to provide affordable housing, both through public-private partnerships and through their own development of it. And that number 3 there was about how could we encourage private developers to then also participate.
I think the question then may be on the word prioritize. Is the priority to look toward public sector development versus private development? And I'm not sure that we want to say that we want to build, you know, that's our priority, is to look at putting in
So how
something more
about,
large.
what if we mirrored number 3 below and used encourage? Encourage public sector or investigate public sector support?
Public
I
sector,
would-
maybe, okay, let's Scott, you know, because he's the public sector guy, so.
No, I would say the more that we allow ourselves flexibility inside this document, because to achieve moratoriums is going to take a lot of work on a lot of people, and it's going to make a lot of people uncomfortable. So the more sort of like encourage versus prioritize is probably correct in a document like this, which just gives us a little bit more freedom as we move forward to figure out ways that are as smart as possible to get where we need to go.
And I would also suggest that we might want to add another bullet here that says, educate New Canaan's community about affordable housing issues, regulations, and alternative strategies, because we need to engage. It's a totally new bullet, but we need to allow people, for example, all the folks who called in who are still feeling like their questions didn't get answered from our last meeting. We need to make it a priority to let people know how all this works.
I think that's a great idea, Art. And I'd add the word after regulation. I'd add the word mandates, because there's certain things we're being required to do, which are even more important under the regulation side, which is it's frustrating.
So
No,
I
it's
would suggest
ahead.
that if we're going to add another bullet, because these 4 items here flow from the chart on page 20, which is kind of broken into 4 main strategies with sub strategies beneath. To me, that education piece is a sub strategy that probably belongs under the second section on page 20, as opposed to adding a whole nother thing here. I mean, we didn't summarize all 12 strategies on this page. We only summarized kind of the bigger picture ones, which, I mean, we can change that if we want to be more specific. We could summarize all 12 here, but I just think there's kind of a flow to the document.
I think that's a great point. And by the time you start summarizing 12, you're not actually doing anything. So I think prioritizing is huge. And I think that's a good idea.
Lynn, I would make the comment that, you know, since this is an addendum to the Westcog, and Westcog is considered a toolbox of strategies, that we ought to coordinate our particular strategies with how Westcog is describing them.
I think they have, if I recall correctly, they have something about educating the public just in general about affordable housing, to put it into a positive vein. So I could definitely draw from their plan.
Yeah, that's my point. Let's use their toolbox and which ones we're going to draw upon and prioritize or encourage, et cetera. So.
Okay, that's fine.
I mean, the other is, to look at, public-private partnerships that I've been reading a lot of the other towns' plans. And a lot of those are focused on educating the public, but also getting buy-in from different groups in the community. And I think that is a piece here that comes into play, but I think it is one that we would need, that ties into that education piece.
So I think for the next comment, I think we kind of spoke about it, about how we strategies that the town's committing to, and I'm just going to sort of move down. So we got a comment from the public that we make a reference to the addition of 67 affordable units in the form of the Schoolhouse Apartments and Avalon, and that we should compare that with essentially what they're asking with the 714 affordable housing units that's needed to satisfy 830G is really the fair share plan that's put forward by I believe it's the Open Communities Alliance in the bill that was proposed in the legislature. I don't know that like that's not a requirement of the state. It's that's a fair share presentation of how one sector in the affordable housing community wants to present what each community is required to do. I don't know where the community falls on that. My inclination is that it doesn't necessarily belong in this document, because if that's not a strategy or a goal of the towns, then we wouldn't be leaning on it.
I tend to agree, Lynn, and also if the committee felt like we did want to add it in this document, I don't think it would really belong under planning history, since that's not history, that's the future, potentially.
On the contrary, I would think that the comment here is because we don't go back that far. We start with the 2003, and the point is that, the history goes back farther. I mean, actually, you could go back farther to the original Canaan Parish, which was very early, even predating the state's emphasis on affordable housing.
That's true. I wonder if we shouldn't add a sentence about Canaan Parish in the late 70s, I think it was.
Yeah.
And Millport dating back to the late 50s.
Mm.
Okay, so it sounds like everyone's in agreement on.
Yes.
So that would also include Avalon. Well, I guess Avalon's already in here.
Avalon's in there. Avalon was 90. I think the original application was in 91, but they didn't get approved to build until like 97 or 98.
No. The settlement wasn't until 99, so they started building in 2000 or so.
Okay, yes, that is correct. But I believe the original application to PNC was 91. It was about a decade into.
So what about the development over on Locust Avenue? Didn't that include a proportion of affordable in that development?
Which development on Locust Avenue?
It's over, I don't remember the name of it. It's down toward Route 123.
The condo townhouses, and yes,
Right,
it did include some affordable.
It was an ownership affordable model.
Lynn, I think it might be called the Villages at New Canaan or something.
It's I forget, it's something like that.
It's referenced in the 2011 housing opportunity study, so you can find the name of it there. I think it was built in the 90s maybe as well.
Yeah, both of those have expired, both Avalon and they have expired as far as their affordability, but it was something that we did.
Okay,
And that's been like early 90s, I think. So I remember when they were built.
okay. I'll go back and look at the history for that and see if I can pull that out.
Yeah, I guess the point, Lynn, is that we started this history in 1989 with 830G, but that's not really the history of affordable housing. That's when the state started creating a mandate.
So I can go back and add language that puts the history to when we started doing it.
Mhm. When Millport was built, that was post World War II, wasn't it, Scott?
That's what started the housing authority.
So it wasn't,
Bill,
Early 50s.
So it's
Yeah, so Millport-
1954. I mean, it was part of a federal program
right.
originally deploying housing in tons of markets. And the original building was built, I think it was 54.
Focused on veterans.
and then there was a second version that was the public housing that was up higher, that was sort of like the mill apartment stuff.
Yep, and that was also HUD housing.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, I'll add language that goes back further on our history, so that it doesn't start with 830G and 89. It starts with when New Canaan built affordable housing. I think that yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, in Canaan Parish, yes, we will be completed in 2022
Okay,
for the next 40 units.
that's good news.
Come hell or high water. We'll get there.
So some of the next comments, some of them I don't think are germane to this document, but there are comments on why when the merit proposal, now known as the view, came through, why they didn't include affordable housing units, and that it was an opportunity that the town didn't grasp. I think we've discussed that, but I don't think it's necessarily germane to this topic, because this is looking forward for the town for the next 5 years. If you guys disagree.
The only thing I'd like to add here is that I think you're correct. I think it's not germane to this document, but Lynn, just as a matter of protocol, I think that at some point we should be saving these so that if the folks who heard and took the time to participate in our call a couple of weeks ago say, how come we didn't add that? We have a simple answer, right? Which is that in that particular case, it's not germane to this document. We're glad to discuss the history.
But I would also add that we didn't have any requirements for multifamily projects to include affordable units prior to last year. So none of them did. It wasn't just the view, which obviously was a lost opportunity, but anything that was developed in town by the private sector didn't include affordable units.
Correct. And then we got a comment about why did we introduce the housing authority as the exclusive vehicle for development of affordable housing, but we don't discuss New Canaan neighborhoods. Am I correct in that New Canaan neighborhoods is the nonprofit side that helps enable the housing authority to?
No, No, it's a
No?
separate nonprofit. It developed Canaan Parish on its own in 1978. We entered into a limited partnership agreement with the Housing Authority to redevelop Canaan Parish with the current process, but it is still a 501c3 nonprofit organization.
Okay.
We're joined at the hip on Canaan Parish right now with the Housing Authority because of the tax credits.
Okay. So it's a vehicle for which we can partner
Right.
on affordable housing projects, should the town move forward on affordable housing projects.
In
Right.
fact, another way to say this might be New Canaan Neighborhoods is an excellent example of a public-private partnership
Right.
that has its independent mission, but has also caused the creation and expansion of affordable housing stock.
It serves as a model. I mean, the Housing Authority has access to financing that a lot of private organizations don't. And so it allows that kind of partnership allows you to do more with modest means.
Peggy, is the mission of New Canaan Neighborhoods specific to Canaan Parish? Like, do you?
No, it is not. It's to provide affordable housing in New Canaan. So it's not specific to Canaan Parish, not limited to. Yeah.
Okay, and then we got a similar comment again about why none of the projects included affordable housing. I think we answered it, that it wasn't required until last year. And this comment refers to the moratorium and again, wants to know why we didn't apply immediately. I think that's a topic for another meeting and another conversation separate on affordable housing. But if you guys disagree, let me know. I'm kind of going through this quickly because I know that we want to have a conversation about some of the recommendations. So, and I know some of you have to leave early. If there's something I pass and you really want to comment on it, please stop me. So this comment talks about if our goal is, if New Canaan is never going to meet the goal of 10% of affordable housing and we don't have rolling coverage, are developers going to just come in significant numbers and build, or are we going to plan for it? I suspect we don't have a full answer here because this kind of covers multiple topics on affordable housing. We can't apply for a moratorium, a certificate of housing completion, unless we actually build new affordable units. And the numbers that we're required to build are going to be dependent on the number of housing units in the last approved census. And we have to build 2% of that number in order to qualify. And then all those units would have to be deed restricted and follow the stipulations laid out in 830G. I don't know that we want to say something here that kind of talks about that, but let me know if I'm mistaken.
So could I argue or suggest here, Lynn, that we do not want to do that? That gets into the tactics and a plan, not our strategies here, which should be at the top of the house. So my recommendation, this is another thing that if we want to do a public forum in education, we can discuss that, but I don't think we want to go into that long diatribe here.
I would agree, but I don't make up the entire committee, so I just sort of want it out.
But no, I'm just giving you a vote.
Okay.
I think there is some value in laying out in the document, because that may be the only thing that people see, is what exactly is affordable and what, if we're going to be talking about gaining a moratorium, working toward a moratorium is one of our strategies. What is it that counts in the moratorium? It is not necessarily naturally occurring affordable housing unless it's deed restricted. I mean, it's fairly limited in definition as to what we can do. And I think the more people understand that, then it's not just, oh, well, you know, my neighbor's not paying that much because he's paid off his mortgage or he's living in an old house. His landlord's not, you know, charging him much. That's different than what is deed restricted affordable that counts under 830G. So I think we do need to have some level of education there in this document that talks about that.
I mean, to kind of keep it separate, I can also put it as its own like pull-out box with like a couple of bullet points. We have a fax of frequently asked questions online available right now on the town's website that explains moratorium and how we could, you know, get it. I can, you know, pull from that document and put a few of those in this document if that would help add clarity to it.
I think Peggy has a point there that's very good, because again, most people don't understand this at all. And like I've gotten lots and lots of questions about accessory dwelling units, and just pointing out to people, it's like, they're great. They would do a lot to help affordability of housing in New Canaan, but they would not help us on our affordable housing, because unless people are willing to deed that on their property for a long time, it doesn't count. So I think some sort of a little definition inside here for people who care, they can find it here. And then again, if you reference them somewhere else, I think that's fine too.
Okay.
Other thing I would add, Lynn, is that I know, you know, this is intended to be an addendum to Westcog's plan. I'm assuming, I have read Westcog's plan. I don't have it in front of me at the moment, but I would assume that that plan probably also clearly discusses, you know, the definition issue, and you could probably pull from there or reference that.
Yeah, I think they, if I remember correctly, they spent a whole chapter on that topic.
It's a good point, Krista. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm kind of skipping over the information, the comments that people had about the charts. The charts came right out of Westcog's plan. So, I mean, I can make a note, and even Westcog, some of the citations for the charts that Westcog used that were in our annex, I can add the citations back. Some of them sort of fell off, but the charts are referenced right back into their plan. So I wasn't planning to add it. I can add some more language to further describe them, but or I could just pull from the Westcog plan on their explanations for them.
I think that just whatever you can do just to make sure the charts actually make some sort of sense and are relevant to what we're dealing with. So not like a USA Today chart that just has like a graph of something random. That's good.
Okay. I think some of the citations fell off, and I think that made them, like, it didn't reference back, but they reference back to the Westcog plan. And Westcog right now, they received positive feedback at their public meetings, but they received very negative feedback on their online comments, and they removed their document from the web because they're in the process of revising it, and it should be available within the next week or so. So I think that'll make it easier for people to connect it to this document. This comment that we received came from the public that noted that, and I thought it was a fair comment, because the argument that's being made around affordable housing is that people that need affordable housing should be living in the communities that they work in, because it cuts their transportation costs. But the point that was made was that many people that live in New Canaan don't necessarily work in New Canaan, they work elsewhere. And sometimes people make decisions about where they want to live based on location, based on the type of housing they want to live, like more urban, more rural, suburban, where they want to send their kids to school. You know, if both parents work, are they picking a place in the middle? So I can add something into the document to explain that housing choice is a choice. And sometimes it's personal.
You know what? I'm going to only make a suggestion here that adding a phrase about desirability of increasing housing choice is useful. Anything going beyond that becomes potentially preachy or, you know, a source of argumentation as opposed to fact, Krista. You know, and I think that, Lynn, to leave it with a choice encouragement is a great idea. I think you go beyond that, somebody will be unhappy no matter what.
That's a great suggestion. Thank you, Art. Does anyone else have any comments before I move on? I'm going to take that as a no. This also was a similar comment on about where young millennials or college graduates would choose to live. I think you're right, Art, in what you just stated before, that we should just make a simple statement about there should be a comment about the desirability of housing choice, and that's it. Does anyone agree or disagree?
I agree.
Concur.
I agree.
And then we're down to page 20 with the strategies. So based on the comments we had before with the comments about a moratorium and making the rolling moratorium, Westcog says we should remove it, but that's a town strategy. I'll clean up the language, but it sounds like we're going to leave it in.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I just wanted to make sure I heard everyone correctly. Okay. So this comment notes, and I think this leads to some of the discussions that we've had as a committee and others have had in town, is that we don't point out actual potential future housing sites. And we don't have timelines. Yeah. And that we don't have timelines, we don't have, and we haven't outlined where we would put it. Is it fair to say that and I heard this from the Planning and Zoning Commission at their meeting when they offered comment on it, is that that would sort of be something for a future committee to decide locations and the nuances and the mechanisms of how to make it happen, but that we have an opportunity right now and we should grasp it and build on it and use the momentum from the community to identify our priorities in moving affordable housing forward.
I would agree. I would not, I mean, it would be so silly to go ahead and identify target properties inside of a document like this. And again, we don't have the time nor the resources to go ahead and properly really vet everything. So for a couple reasons, I would concur on that.
And to me, this strategy reads pretty clearly that it's saying that we need to do that. We haven't done it, but we need to do that. And so, I mean, we don't have all the details laid out, but this strategy is about trying to figure out those details.
Yes.
And we don't want to have people speculating on what's mentioned and going forward. I mean, we need to do it, but it's going to take a while. It's not going to be in this document.
I agree with all of you, actually. It's
You don't need to sound that surprised, Lynn.
no, because this is more like an executive level document of what we want to hit, but we can't hit every point. And then some of these comments, maybe it sounds obvious to all of you, but the one comment here about large lot zones, I was going to add in a little explanation of what a large lot zone is. I would have thought it would have seemed obvious, but then I realized that not everyone spends their days in planning or zoning, so they might not know what it is, and that a 4-acre zone would be considered a large lot zone versus a 3rd-acre zone or an A residence zone in town. So I was going to add in like a little line or two just to break that down.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Again, factual information which will help educate people. A great idea.
I think on this comment from Todd, I actually think they misunderstood what we were trying to do. I think we just need to word it better, because their comment was that the building code establishes minimums for habitable space because a lot of communities set their minimum housing size above what an affordable unit would be sized at, and I think that's not the goal we were trying to get to here. And so like in some of the zones, like for instance in the retail A zone or in the retail B zone, we limit the size that you could go to a maximum to kind of keep the units smaller. So if you're developing downtown, you would actually have a smaller unit to maximize the opportunities. So I think just need to clarify the language there. Does anyone disagree with me?
No, I mean, it does seem that there's a bit of a misunderstanding, which probably indicates the language could be improved.
Okay. I think this section, we got some comments on it from both Westcog people, and I just was going to pull out the language from Westcog's larger plan about what a cost burdened household is. They actually had a very good definition of it. I mean, it's just straight state statute, but I think they just put a little bit of a layperson spin on it to kind of explain it better. Would you guys say that's fair, or? Sorry.
You know, I think that everything we add that helps to clarify facts relative to the mandates and regulations is useful, and especially pulling from the COG document, as Kevin indicated, is a smart thing anyway. So
Okay.
yes.
Okay. So I think we're at the end of the document. Does anyone have any other comments on the comments we received? Because I think I'd like to move us to have a larger discussion of what this committee thinks are the next steps moving forward. Because I suspect that this is going to be a dynamic document, and dynamic as in that it's not static, not that it's like that's where I was using the term, and that what we put in the document is a starting point for if recommendation is to create an affordable housing committee. It's a starting point for that committee as opposed to an ending point. But it's like a jumping off point for everybody.
Lynn, I think we should have that conversation. I'm just wondering if some of the things we've said tonight or had said previously, if we don't have additional strategies to add to the chart on page 20 in the language thereafter, like the one we talked about earlier about education.
Yes.
So, I mean, that might be fruitful as well to, you know, as we have this conversation, if there's strategies we need to add into this strategy section, figure out what they are and where they go.
That's a good point.
Lynn, I agree with you entirely that what we've probably just created here is a dynamic document. And the best thing we could get would be a lot of discussion about it amongst the community members who care. One question is, would your intention be to make these amendments and publish it to the public again?
Well, we would put it online and publish it. I guess that would be the best way to publish it. Right now, this document as it stands, and with the comments that were made tonight, would be presented to the Board of Selectmen on Tuesday on the 17th.
Yep.
For adoption. And then as part of the annex of the Westcog plan. And then it would be sent up to the state, but the deadline from the state is the state's deadline, and it may be for the town that this is an artificial deadline, that we have to get in what we have to get in by X date, but that this could be the starting point of a future conversation and a continuing conversation about affordable housing and what needs to happen in New Canaan and our strategies to get there, how we want to implement our strategies.
So can I just parrot back what you just said, Lynn? What I heard is you'll make the amendments, we'll publish it where anyone can read it. It'll go to the select board for consideration, and we will emphasize that it is a dynamic document. Is that a fair summation?
That is.
Yeah, that's great. And it's a lot further than we were a couple of weeks ago.
Correct.
Lynn, I'd also know, as I learned yesterday, and as you know, Westcog is going to have a new revised draft on Monday.
Yes.
And because of comments they received. So we need to digest that. And I'm not sure the Board of Selectmen will act on Tuesday. And the fact that we have the ability to ask for a bit of an extension beyond June 1 is something we may want to do. Others are doing that if they're not quite ready to file on June 1.
I actually would kind of argue toward, it's like, let's go ahead and let's get this filed and let's keep it as a commitment to the town that this is an active document, and whatever follow-on committee from this will continue to study and research it. Because the reality is, even if we wait for Westcon, for all we know, Hartford comes up with some, plan that changes all the rules 3 weeks later. I mean, admittedly, they're going out of session, so they hopefully can't do that. But, anytime they're in session, we're in danger of our whole plan going out of becoming irrelevant anyway. And so, I mean, this does have to become a dynamic plan. And I think that where we are is a really good starting point for any other committee that would follow behind us.
So Lynn, one of the thoughts I had in terms of moving forward and sending this to the Board of Selectmen or onto Westcog is that maybe this committee wants to have you pen a cover letter on our behalf that sort of says this is the starting point. We think we need an ongoing group to continue to implement this, and maybe even here are the top couple of strategies we think we should work on first. And then, whoever picks it up from there kind of has the full thought process and, here's where we left off and here's where we think you should pick up and just see where it goes. I don't know if that's appropriate, but that was just a thought I had.
Then I have to run.
Okay. Sorry.
No, I would really push toward it's like, let's go ahead and I think we've done some very good work here. I think we've probably done as good a work as we can do. I mean, we're now down to the marginal parts of like, is it 2% better or 2% worse if we do more stuff? And again, I think that for this to be worthwhile, there has to be follow-on work on the town's part in order to actually, really address this issue that's so important. And again, I think everybody in town views it as important, either from the fact that we need units or we need to prevent 830G cram down. So I think this is a great point, and I don't know how much more we would add if we were to go ahead and go for an extension and keep doing this for months more.
Yeah, I agree with Scott. And I think, to start to implement some of these things, it's a lot of work to drill down to the next level. And that's just not a place we're going to get to in a couple of weeks or even, a month or two. So continuing to delay it isn't really going to make this document that much better, in my opinion.
It's not as if we've, got reports, data that we're waiting to come in to, to analyze and do a final report. We're basically at the starting line, but realizing that this is a roadmap and this is our starting point. But I think the interest in the town is such that we'll hopefully get some people who really want to cooperate, and not just planning and zoning and housing authority, but others in town that have some good ideas and not just basically want to shut down everything. Because one way or another, we're gonna be building it. Let's build it the way we'd like to see it fit in the town. And I think a cover letter, or even like incorporating some of our conclusion into the introduction, some of those ideas, and this is laying it out and where we are, I think would help. Sort of like the old rule of a speech: you tell them what you're going to tell them, you tell them, and then you tell them what you told them.
Yeah, and I'll just add that one of the things that came up, we did discuss this at our last Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, this draft of the plan, which was after the comment session we had with the public. And one of the things that I heard loud and clear, and I think John and probably Art did and Lynn did too, is that the planning commissioners think there needs to be an ongoing committee, body, group that's multidisciplinary, and the fact that it's representative of finance and the housing authority and planning and zoning and other town bodies as we see fit, that continues to work on implementing this. So I think that needs to be a strong recommendation somewhere, whether it's in the cover letter and the intro. But I think that's an important piece of this, is that there has to be an ongoing group that's going to work to implement this.
Yeah, I've had some discussions with my counterparts in other towns, and the cold hard reality of the 830G rules is that in a resurgent Connecticut real estate market, is that our town folk are going to be very uncomfortable with what Hartford has imposed on us. And there's going to be a lot of education, a lot of cooperation, a lot of things that have to change inside of the town structure, not necessarily the governing bodies, but inside of people, especially who have not participated in governing bodies, to really understand and help and try to move this forward. Because again, these are rules from Hartford, and until you spend time with them, you just really don't get what the intent is and what the implications are. You might think you do, but it's there's a lot here to chew on, and we got a lot of really smart people in this town. And the more they learn, the more hopefully people can come up with the added ideas, the added resources, the added initiative, the added time in order to help really make them occur. and be willing to accept the compromises necessary to make them occur.
And so another thought I had in terms of going forward and next steps, and I think we've probably talked about this in the past, is that, in order to implement this plan, or even just, some of the top strategies of this plan, I think the town's probably going to need a consultant from the outside. I mean, we're going to need someone to do the studies, to do the research, to do the work. If we want to have a strong education component, I think we need someone to help run that and figure out what, how that needs to be managed. So, I mean, if we had a cover letter, that's another piece I'd put in there, is that in addition to a standing committee, the town really needs to think about hiring a professional consultant to sort of continue to shepherd this thing and have the capacity to do the research to kind of figure out how to implement it.
I think, or at least they need to provide financial resources for the net follow-on committee to allocate to do that. I mean, 'cause I think you're right. That'll lead toward a consultant, maybe just leaving it a little bit more open under just, it's like, look, we got to allocate money to this.
Yeah,
That's a
fair
great point.
We will certainly need to devote town resources, no matter how they come to bear.
Yep.
So, for the committee, do you want me to put together a cover letter that sort of highlights all of these points? Or would you prefer that it be added into, say, the introductory section of the document? You're on mute. Art, you're on mute.
I'm sorry. I think that people will read a document. I love the idea of a letter to cover it, but I'm afraid the letter may get separated and the points may not make it through. So if you were to write the bullets that summarize our intent, it becomes part of our strategy. And I think that's helpful, would be my thought. And if you could do it either way, Lynn, and I know you get the essence of what this group is trying to bring, right? Which is, we've got a lot of work to do. We've energized a lot of people. We need to educate a lot of people, and the town is going to have to develop a new approach in order to succeed in this difficult area. I don't care whether you do it as a cover or whether you do it individually. The problem with a cover letter is it can get separated.
This is just one chapter, one town's chapter in the Westcog overall plan. And I think if it isn't part of the document, like Art was saying, it risks being separated. So I think in the introduction would be a good place to summarize it.
I guess my thought, just, I don't have a strong feeling either way. Since I suggested the cover letter, I'll give my reasoning behind it, which is that the support, the creation of an ongoing committee, the financing of a consultant, or even, putting money into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, those are things that are going to have to be taken by the respective town bodies, Board of Selectmen, Town Council. And so as this goes through the adoption process, I thought it would be relevant to address a letter to those approving bodies saying, not only is this our plan, here's what we think you need to be doing next. So to me, it was the reason for a cover letter was more about the audience of who we were making those requests of, or those suggestions to, as opposed to, it being part of the document itself.
So you're thinking the cover letter is more like toward the New Canaan community as opposed to the people reading the Westcog compilation.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's like, okay, here's our plan. Certain bodies have to adopt this, but know that you can't just, if you just adopt it and walk away, nothing happens. You have to follow through on some of these other things.
That's almost the beginning step of community engagement that we were talking about doing anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the concept of a dynamic document. Anyway, yeah, I like that, Krista.
And I'd almost think it's like, you almost kind of cheat. It's like, let's write the cover letter, and that's page 1 of our proposal.
Yeah.
And then the whole proposal is behind that. I mean, it's so therefore let's put it one PDF. It doesn't get separated. It's right there. And anyone who, most people don't have time to read this whole document. So what's that sort of executive summary / cover letter that allows people to go ahead and get the heart of the issue right up front.
Agreed.
And then I think, Lynn, for you, it's like, if this doesn't make any sense, then you can come back to tell us it just doesn't work that way. And we have to go with either a pure cover letter or a different introduction.
I'm gonna see if I can make it work. Let's see if we can make like an executive summary that's sort of addressed as a cover letter, and then we can also, we could put together a separate cover letter, but I think some of the points of it being separated are valid. Let me see if there's a way we can create a sort of cover letter intent with like an overall executive summary at the start of the document that lays it all out.
So another question or thought I had that I wanted to ask the group is, we've put this together as 12-ish strategies that's recommended. Do we as a group do we think it's our responsibility to sort of say, here are the top 3, if you were going to choose 3 things to do, we think you should do A, B, and C? Or do we think that's a process that should be worked through with the public after this document gets adopted? And or do we think that's a process that the next committee that picks this up in terms of implementation starts with? And, I don't think anyone's going to pick this up and say, okay, let's try and do all 12. That's just too much to bite off. So I don't know if there's any value in us making some recommendations about what we think is most important in here, or if we just let the next group who picks it up or with the help of the public decide where we go, with this roadmap, but which directions we turn first.
I would vote to allow all 12 to go out there, and perhaps, Lynn, when you do that cover, say that amongst the 12 strategies are an early template for discussions about how to move forward.
I think leaving it to the successor group is probably the right way to go. Again, just knowing that things are going to continue to change beyond our control.
Peggy, do you have any thoughts on it?
I don't think it's up to us to prioritize. I think the priorities will naturally emanate from the strategies, and attention on 830G will tend to focus the attention in a big way from both committee, public, and the town government. So I think what they're going to prioritize is going to rise to the top, but some of them are symbiotic. Getting community buy-in, education, those are big, and looking at partnerships, those are ways of doing that. But the ultimate goal is to keep things moving forward. Those are the must-haves where it's going to be focusing the attention. I would agree to put them out there and acknowledge that we are very focused right now on a couple of them, but those are not to the exclusion of the others.
And I think this whole process is going to be very opportunistic. If the right piece of land comes up, it's like, look, we're going to grab it and develop it. If the right development comes along, we're going to back it. If the right grant comes along, we're going to grab it. So
Right.
we want to leave flexibility to be very opportunistic.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts? None? Okay. So then, for next steps forward, I'm going to, go back and take the comments that, were just made, edit the document, and, make some of the things more clear and embellish some of the other stuff. It'll be put online. It'll also be, as of next week, when Westcog publishes their plan, it'll be available, the Westcog plan will be available, so it'll be easier to understand how they integrate into each other. It'll go to the Board of Selectmen, they may hold that over. And then as part of the editing of the document, we're going to edit the introduction to sort of create a cover letter executive summary that sort of indicates some of the recommendations of this committee, that there'll be a long-term affordable housing committee, that there be consideration given to financing that committee, and allowing them to, allowing them to prioritize the strategies and use the strategies that are indicated in this document as a starting point for their future discussions. And they may change the strategies, they may add to the strategies, they may narrow it down, but let it be up to the next committee or group to move it forward. Did I hear everyone correctly, or did I misspeak something?
I think you got it all.
Yeah, that sounded good, Lynn.
Okay. Does anyone have anything else to add? Otherwise, I would recommend that we adjourn.
Thank you, Lynn, for all your work.
Thank you, Lynn.
Well, thank you all. And for your time that you've dedicated to this.
We appreciate your leadership.
Thank you.
I will
Okay.
make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, does that
I'll second
agree?
it.
Second,
Okay,
all in favor? Yeah.
Thank you.
thank you. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you very much.